is sweet, and death a dream. When thy song flows through me, my Lord, when thy song flows through me, then praise is sweet, and blame a dream. Then praise is sweet, and blame a dream. When thy song flows through me, my Lord, when thy song flows through me. Good afternoon. Welcome, friends, to the unpublished writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Today happens to be a drop-dead glorious day here on Camino Island. And once again, as before, I see the garbage truck coming by. But the view here is beyond spectacular. I wish I could show it to you. But I'll enjoy it for you. There's the garbage truck, like I said, right on time. The reading I've selected for you is a little bit of a follow-up of Padma's broadcast yesterday. And this one is an essay that Paramhansa Yogananda wrote somewhere between 1928 and 1930 on the question of criticism. You know what's curious about this article is that he uses the thy and the thou and the thee, what used to be in the English language the personal you rather than the more formal. Well, that distinction in languages seems to have dropped away in the European and English languages, but he used it here, and it's really quite awkward. So when I read this, I'm going to try to drop out the thee and thou and thy and also paraphrase some of it. So, when criticized, he writes, analyze yourself. Take a thorough look at your activities, and through the uncompromising eye of your criticizers, your censors, he says, survey and criticize yourself. If you find fault in yourself, correct it quietly and walk on. But if you don't, then smile within. Go on your way in stoic dignity. And if persecutors continue to jeer at you and demand a response, answer with love, not enmity. Then he goes on. This is interesting because he faced this in his work, and so did his disciple and our founder for Ananda, Swami Kriyananda, which is, if you hold a position in which others look to you for guidance and for truth, answer or battle for truth with love in your heart, not for your honor or fear of a bad name, but uphold the glory and purity of truth. Now, this is much more difficult because Jesus was accused by the Pharisees, his accusers and persecutors, of speaking for himself and speaking from ego, in other words, when he would use the personal pronoun I am the way, the light, and the truth, and various things like this. And he had this argument with the Pharisees in which the Pharisees said, well, one who boasts for himself is clearly not being truthful. And Jesus was clever in his response, but it's a hard thing to, in his response, he was affirming that the I, the personal pronoun, was the Christ, the consciousness of God, not the ego speaking. But it was very hard to put that into words, especially when you are being accused. But nonetheless, he stood up for himself. When Swami Kriyananda was vilified in various ways and by various people, he too would stand up. He would not defend himself when the accusations were personal so much, but when it had to do with his right to represent spiritual truths and represent the teachings of his guru, from whom he received a personal commission to do so. Nonetheless, it puts such a person in a very delicate position of seeming to self-justification is the death of the soul. So, but nonetheless, as Yogananda discovered, and representing the teachings of India and those of his own lineage in America, and when he was falsely accused, he felt the necessity to stand up for those truths. Okay, so love for truth, however, must always be tempered with the love of avoiding hurt to others. Defamation of others in the name of spreading truth or for your own benefit is a sign of ego, obviously, and inner weakness. So fight not even for truth if love is not in your heart. I've had several occasions in my life doing what I do for Ananda here in the state of Washington, where I had to confront someone in the name of the work and in the name of what was right for the situation at hand. And I can't always say I was completely calm, or what you might say there. I can't say I was completely without emotion, but I stood by the fact that I knew in my heart that I was standing up for what was true. So I bring that up for the simple fact that, you can state these truths on paper, but it's not always, you can't learn if you always have to be, completely 100% pure, if your intention was right. In other words, I remember in some of those occasions where not only did I know I was speaking for truth, but I also, more importantly, I knew that I had no intention of harming the person involved, even if I perhaps had to issue or say some things strongly, let's say. I would not have done so, even if there were some emotion in it, but I would not have done so if there was any desire to attack or hurt. That much I could be sure of. But the situation could be somewhat intense. And I can't always say, though sometimes, but I can't always say that there was no emotion involved. But it was not the emotion to hurt. This is important. For example, in parenting, it's easy for a parent to get angry. And that's where you want to stop. That's, again, you can't be perfect in these things necessarily. But if you do discipline a child, or in the case of a work environment, an employee, if that's your job to do so, then, you may not be able to do it perfectly, but you have to hang on to some sense of what is right, both for the occasion, and call it the work if you want to call it that, but also for the person involved. That's really what he's talking about here. Our knowledge of what is right or truth is always susceptible to error. So what he's really talking about is what's going on in the heart. Okay? Let's see. Those who hate and revile you are not knowers of truth, so forgive them, because in their ignorance they know not what they do. There he's purposely, although it's not in quotes, he's obviously quoting Jesus Christ from the cross. And this is interesting, is you love to forgive yourself. Isn't that so? As you love to forgive yourself, no matter what you've done, love to forgive others just as readily. Of course, there's not all of us are that quick to forgive ourselves. Some people sort of indulge their self-flagellation. He doesn't seem to address that here, but in any case, I would say normally we're quick to excuse ourselves. I think that's what he's really saying. So if we're quick to excuse our flaws, then be as quick to excuse that of others, those of others. By giving love, let, if necessary, those who revile you be shamed by the steady gift of your love in return for the poison they give to you. Try to change them by your unconditional love. Well, we see that in the life of Mahatma Gandhi and in the life of Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend, and so forth. Blessed are those who are criticized for doing good. No good deed, there's a cliche that says no good deed goes unpunished. And that is very, very true. Okay. Jesus promised persecution for those who stand up for truth teachings. He says, a paradise of eternal bliss is theirs who live and die in right behavior. But woe unto those who, out of jealousy, enmity, or self-interest, malign and seek to harm the good name of those engaged in noble works. Okay. Let's see. He goes on to talk about gossip, which is much more personal and outside of issues of leadership and teachings and so forth. It is therefore much more prevalent. Unkind and unjust criticism causes inharmony and factions. What I remember Swami Kriyananda used the term camps, dividing people into camps, and he warned us in his book Sadhu Beware from being the kind of person who divides people into us and them, into camps, as he put it. The love of gossip is the love to crucify the soul of others. Never forget that. The love of gossip is the love to crucify the soul of others. And doing so ultimately hurts the criticizer even more. The divine way is to judge yourself, if necessary and when appropriate, not other people. True words may be hurtful and bitter when you have to administer them, as I was saying before. So coat them with the sugar of love and kindness so that they might be more easily swallowed by the one stricken with the fever of evil. But if your views are not welcome, this is very useful. If your views are not welcome, maintain silence. Mentally send to the wrongdoer constructive thoughts, love, and prayers with outspoken words, for that is also beneficial and will help to awaken him. He's affirming the power of prayer. Oftentimes I've had a opportunity to talk to someone who's having difficulty, especially with a coworker or a boss. Seems like bosses are a real pill somehow. But never forget that we have our issues too. And so if you're the kind of person who goes from job to job and encounters boss after boss who's a pill, it's time to look inside and see what your role in the issue might be. And then he goes on to say something I can speak from personal experiences being true. To offer criticism, even constructive criticism, is risky. Now, I would add to that, the closer the person is to you, like a spouse, a partner, a family member, the higher that risk is. He doesn't say that, so that's my addendum. But be able yourself to stand criticism is of the great benefit. It tests and reinforces your armor of truth for use in the battle of life. I said last Sunday in a talk I gave at the service that I have seen, and I think I got this from Swami Kriyananda in not so many words, that criticism, the ability and the way in which we handle criticism, real or perceived, is a litmus test, really, of our level of ego transcendence. No good deed goes unpunished, as I quoted the cliche earlier. And so the more we try, oh, comes another garbage truck. Hello, he's going to stop and pick up my garbage. So it could be a little bit noisy. Here he comes. Don't be sure to stop, young feller. Yep, he's stopping. And so here comes all the noise. So, it's a litmus test. And so let it be your litmus test for how you're doing personally. As I said earlier, self-justification is the death of the soul. And so if your tendency when criticized is to lash out and strike back by criticizing your criticizer, then you've got some work to do, okay? And Swami Kriyananda gave the advice to Padma and I in our marriage he said, never say always and never say never. And then I asked myself, well, never always give that advice. Okay. Sense of humor. Be busy in making yourself good. Your example will talk 1,000,000 times louder than any words. Counteract criticism by humbly living the principles of truth. Reform yourself, and by watching your example, let others be inspired to reform themselves. Okay. Conquer vice by virtuous example, error by truth, hatred by love, ignorance by wisdom, fear by courage, narrow-mindedness by understanding, bigotry by liberality. So, that's a very interesting essay that Yogananda wrote many, many decades ago. And so let us take to heart his words on how to handle criticism. Okie doke. So today is a Tuesday, so tomorrow, Wednesday, you will have the blessing of counsel from Padma.